Chapter -11.1 Sky Must Die. It's Minnow here. My name means little fish, so we've put some flying fish in among the words. We love them. I'm writing in indigo ink. It was Sky's idea to write everything in massive scrapbooks with fountain pens and real ink. So when you're reading this book with its black print and cream pages, or maybe the screen colour you like and your favourite font, remember that when we first wrote down our story, my creamy scrapbook pages were splattered with Sky's red ink for luck, and hers had big splashes of indigo ink all over them, also for luck. We still have our scrapbooks. They're messy, but we don't care. We had the best fun writing this record of our adventure to end all adventures. We hope you enjoy it. My part in the story starts a few weeks before I met Sky and Ben Walker. I had a really weird dream that turned into a nightmare. When I think of it, the dream and the nightmare were probably trying to warn me about everything that was about to happen. All the magic, all the things that would have seemed totally impossible before we met Ben and Sky, all the danger. But how could I have known that I was being sent warnings? In the happy part of my dream, I was high above the earth and I could see our incredible blue planet floating in outer space. The sun was far away, beaming at the earth as if it was in love. And then, from somewhere deep in space, a massive angel rose up. Its head was about the size of Mars. As the angel wrapped its arms and wings around the planet, streams of golden water flowed down onto the earth. I felt an immense happiness coming from the planet as it rested in the angel's embrace. Without warning, there was a loud whooshing sound as a flying pirate ship emerged from within the angel's wings. The ship was of burnished bronze, and a winged woman stood high in its rigging. All around was a great cloud of silvery white steam that shot up into the air. But as I stared at it, I realised that it wasn't a cloud at all. It was millions of tiny fairies. Then, as if by magic, I could see that each one of them had tiny clocks and watches strapped to their arms and legs. Some of the fairies even wore things about time on their little hats and scarves. The time fairies were full of some kind of wild energy as they flew about doing cartwheels in the air. But before I could think too much about them, the focus of the dream moved back to the woman standing high in the rigging of the flying ship. All of a sudden, she flew up above the angel's head before nose-diving down towards the earth, her wings pressed really hard against her back. At that moment, dark clouds moved in to surround everything. The only light I could see was a tiny speck where the sun had been. I felt the worst sort of dread that seemed to be telling me that everything I'd ever known was about to end. The tiny speck of light suddenly erupted into flames that crackled across the storm clouds. They looked like fireworks and spelled out the words, "Sky must die," all written in capitals. I woke with a start and wondered what it all meant. I told my cousin all about it, but Frank and I didn't think it made any sense. In the end, I forgot about the whole thing until I found out there was a girl at our school called Sky. That was a few weeks later. Frank and I had been asked to perform a song in front of everyone at our school. Decker Bandit is our music teacher, and we think he's the greatest musician ever. He's also one of the kindest people we know. But, why did he have to recommend us to play at assembly? We hate assemblies because the head of our school only holds them to shout at us and tell us everything we've done wrong. She insists on being called Baroness Thieve, even though we all know she's not one and probably doesn't even know how to spell the word. She claims that the president of our whole country is her godfather, but we don't believe anything she says. Her name is Isla, spelled Eyela, but Frank and I call her the Eye of Mordor, after the big eye in The Lord of the Rings. We also call her the Eye of Moron, which seems more correct. She shares her rule with her husband, who is just as nasty as his wife. He insists on being called Overlord Thieve. People say he used to be a bishop, but he's not allowed to be called that anymore because he was cruel to animals. Frank's dad says he must be unwell, but Frank and I think he's just plain evil. Either way, he doesn't seem qualified to teach. At least he doesn't know anything about most of the things that Frank and I know, and the things he does know are entirely useless. On the day of our special concert, I'd woken up feeling happy. My bedroom is at the top of an old church tower that overlooks the sea. That morning the sun was shining and heaps of ocean gulls were swooping about, making their wild squawks. It was great. But when I remembered about assembly and having to be on stage with the eye of moron, I wanted to crawl back into bed. Just as I was about to pull the covers over my head, the smell of toast and eggs wafted up the stairs and into my room. Yum! Dad's breakfasts are very good. I ran down to the kitchen. Eggs? Asked Dad. It's the best day out there. Dad was beaming, but I groaned. Good for some. I've got assembly. I know. You and Frank are going to be brilliant. You coming? Dad laughed. Wouldn't miss it. Just as well. I stood next to Dad, helping to slice mushrooms. He grinned, nodding towards Mum. She can't come, he mouthed. I rolled my eyes. Mum was staring at her laptop, catching up on the news. God help us, she said. Will Isla Thieve stop at nothing? What's she done now? Asked Dad. Mum shuddered. The day the Baroness came to run our school was the day it went to hell. What's happened? I asked, going over to look at Mum's laptop. She's forcing the Walker kids to stay at her ridiculous youth centre. Old-fashioned orphanage is more like it. It's a prison, I said. She makes the so-called orphans dress in red so they won't run away. How would red clothes stop anyone from running away? Asked Mum. Fear of being caught, I said. Isla says people would notice them in their red track suits. Then the thieves could hunt them down. Dad shook his head. How do they get away with that? He asked. She's so tight with the president, said Mum. Apparently every state has to have live-in centres for children without parents. Isla wants all the funding, so she tells her godfather that hers is the best. Dad pulled a face. Surely the president's not really her godfather, he said. Anyway, Isla's centre would have to be the worst in the country. Exactly, I said. Mum continued. The Walker children have been there for so long to be assessed. Assessed for what? Dad frowned. Brill Walker's kids. Her niece and nephew, said Mum. The ones whose parents died in Kingsland. Both of them had terrible car crashes. I looked at Mum. Both of them? That's a bit Harry Potter. Ooh, maybe Voldemort did it and everyone's scared that the truth will come out. Mum frowned. Have a heart, she said. The father died when a train crashed into his car. The boy got concussion, but the girl was in a coma for almost a month. Their mother died a few years back, also in a car crash. It was terrible. Sorry, I didn't know. The girl's 10, said Mum. Isn't she in one of your classes? The Eye of Moron won't let us mix with the loony kids. It's against the rules. Don't call them loony, said Mum. And the Eye of Moron, if she catches you calling her that, it won't end well. I rolled my eyes. She deserves it. Anyway, we call Filbert Thieve filthy. Filthy. Get it? Mum sighed. It's not right to be disrespectful, no matter how bad they are. Dad nodded, serving the eggs on toast. I remember those children now, but I don't understand why they'd live in an orphanage when they have an aunt. No idea, said Mum. No one thought the girl would ever wake up, or if she did, they were sure she'd have brain damage. She should be with her aunt, not Isla and Mr. Thieve. Overlord Thieve, I said. Overlord? Asked Mum. That's not even a proper title. He makes us call him Overlord Thieve, I said. Ridiculous, said Dad. I hate the goopy pus in his eyes. Mum shuddered. Don't, she said. He already makes me feel ill. Dad frowned. Wasn't he a bishop somewhere? He was, I said, Ondragolan. I didn't know bishops were allowed to marry, said Mum. They can Ondragolan, said Dad, but after he married, he was booted out of the church there for hurting a bunch of guide dogs. Disgraceful, said Mum, and then they sent him here. Dad nodded, pulling a face. Who would be cruel to dogs that helped blind people? Someone with no heart, I said. Mum looked angry. The Church of Kingsland ought to be ashamed of accepting him. They bend the rules to look after their mates, said Dad. Oh, I'm glad we live in a church and don't have to go to one, I said. Dad laughed. It is rather convenient. I sat at the kitchen table wondering about the poor kids who'd lost their parents. Vanessa says the thieves won't let the Walker kids leave their centre, said Mum. My sister does get a bit carried away, said Dad. No, said Mum. She says that Isla told the Parents' Council that the Walker children have too much grief. Too much grief, repeated Dad. They've lost their father and their mother. Sky and Ben will have grief for the rest of their lives. I didn't know the girl's name was Sky, I said. Sky with an E. Dad shrugged. Not sure. Why? Nothing, I said. But I couldn't help thinking about the nightmare I'd had a few weeks before, the one that ended with letters bursting across storm clouds spelling out, Sky must die. I could still see the words blazing like fireworks. Sky must die. The room felt suddenly very cold.